it lives in us. Our ability to feel joy, to feel happiness, to feel gratitude.
Mariel Witmond guests on All New Intentional Living, inviting us to build a deeper understanding of our truest selves.
I think real joy, like genuine joy, stems from being deeply rooted in who you are. And all of this ties into authenticity.
Helping us create the space for real connection.
Connecting with your authenticity, I mean, all of it. It's connecting with yourself.
All while bringing us back to our one true source of joy and happiness. Do you think our main lesson is coming back to ourselves?
The moment we come home to ourselves is the moment we come home to each other.
On an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers, a podcast dedicated to those seeking a more fulfilled and purposeful life through thought-provoking conversation, spiritual exploration, and authentic connections. The intentional movement has begun, and if you found yourself here, you are a part of it. Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers starts now. Hi, Mariel. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. I'm so honored to have you here today and jump into a conversation that I think is
I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I know. But I think our conversation is going to be so just resonant with so many people because we aren't always living these lives of big tragedy or these big events that are just totally shifting us. Now, I know a lot of people experience that, but I think more of us are living these lives and are going about life in a way that's just like what we're supposed to do, or we're living our life for someone else. And things just don't seem to be like resonating. We just don't feel in alignment. We feel like something's off, yet we don't know what it is. And we don't know why we're just like, it's just not right. And I know you experienced this.
Totally.
And I think this is more common than like the whole, like I had this huge traumatic event and had to change my life. I think it's more common to be kind of like in this place, like something's not working and I don't know what is, and I don't even know what steps to take to make me feel right. I experienced it. I know you experienced it. So let's talk about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think so many of us think that we have to have these big T moments of transformation or transition, these sort of like cataclysmic things that force us to journey inwards in many ways. And I think what happens to the majority of people is that throughout our lives, we experience a series of what they call small T, small trauma, small traumas that are fundamentally a part of our conditioning. And before we know it, we have created these maladaptive coping strategies that can lead to things like people-pleasing, perfectionism, overachieving. And I think what happens is that we have these moments that feel like rock bottom. And I love it when people talk about these like breakdowns as breakthroughs, but it feels like you are living someone else's life. Like you kind of have this moment of like, I feel like I deserve more or I want more. And I don't know how I got here, but this doesn't fundamentally align with my values or who I am. And so many of us don't even know what our values actually are. We think on some kind of conscious level, like, oh, of course I know what my values are. But if anyone put you on the spot, like, what are your top 5 values? You'd be like, And so we often gear off path and you end up feeling like you're living someone else's life to the point where in these moments, I think sometimes something somewhat radical does happen. Like I think we get sick. Or I remember for me, I felt like quicksand. Like I actually felt like the sand in an hourglass. And I felt like my life was disappearing. I was sitting in front of my desk reading the Daily Mail, just all of these sort of toxic messages. And I just didn't feel great in myself. And I just had this moment of, there has to be more to life than living for the next paycheck, living for the next holiday, living for the next weekend. You're always in the future, which makes it really hard to be rooted in the present moment. And I think that's more common than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. I know for me, it was kind of like I was so busy. And I know you come from a background, you were in Hollywood, working in Hollywood in New York in the entertainment industry, just like I was. And you can get caught up in it. And it's really busy and fast paced. And it's like, go, 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 go. I think it's like there becomes a time when you don't have a moment necessarily to breathe. And there's so much focus on the outside that we don't really understand what's going on inside. And you have that moment, and if you don't get sick or if something doesn't happen to you specifically to say, I need to change this, something will happen. In my case, COVID happened, and then production shut down for me. And it was kind of like, oh, okay, what am I doing? I had finally reached everything that I thought I wanted. I had been putting outside of me. When I get this, I will be happy. When I'm married, when I have my children, when I have all these different things, I will feel fulfilled and I will find that happiness. Yet, all of a sudden, the world shut down and I sat here with my husband and my daughter and my house and everything that I thought I wanted. I'm like, there's got to be more. There's more to this. And so, if you don't start to realize it yourself, obviously COVID was a big thing for everyone, but that's something outside of me that changed and made me finally be like, okay, we got to change course here. What I'm doing is not working and I'm not fulfilled. And it's not obviously anything that's outside of me that's helping. It's in me. And we have to figure that out. And I think we all have these moments. And I've actually had this thought process because so many of us go through this I think in our 30s and 40s. And our parents, I think, would call that a midlife crisis. And now we're calling it a spiritual awakening. And I'm curious if they're one and the same.
That's fascinating. I've never really put the two together, but absolutely. That makes total sense. I think we have, this great awakening that shifts our foundation and it can cause us to do some radical things. I think back in the day, a lot of this personal development wasn't quite so common. So, you'd find the men going and buying an expensive car to try to make themselves feel better. But we're now at a time which I'm very grateful that, mental health is kind of pushing to the forefront and things that seem to be taboo no longer are. It's different in every country, but I was living in London up until January this year. And to have a therapist implied that you had some kind of mental illness. And that narrative is shifting. And I think it's incredibly important so that more people, when they feel this midlife crisis coming, they can actually work with someone and understand themselves a little bit better through that sort of reflective mirror.
Well, you really focused on going into the world of yoga, which I think is so interesting because that's bringing you into that mindfulness, yet that movement. And I find that that is one of the big things that we teach in this community is that moving your body will help you find that clarity and will help you connect, like you said, back to the present moment. Now, I find that I'm still too busy to even move myself sometimes, yet I do miss it. But that's what helped you kind of push through and bring you kind of back into what your purpose was. It feels like.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey because it keeps ping-ponging me and has now brought me to a place of much greater awareness. But I did start with yoga. Yoga was something that I did to heal my relationship with my mother. She's been a yoga teacher for almost 20 years now. And it was kind of always something I had on the side. Never really intended on teaching. It kind of just happened. As I left the entertainment industry, I was sort of on this journey of self-discovery. And it was something that my mom recommended that I do, even if I just had it on the side. So it was something that I always had and something I could use for my own personal practice. And yoga has this interesting way of bringing you in for the physical, but then kind of keeping you hooked for the deeper, sort of more philosophical, spiritual sides of it, it's very subtle. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to go for the fitness. I'm going to go for the exercise. And yoga's been such a big part of my personal growth journey. But it's funny. I really do feel, being a life coach and being a yoga teacher, that it's the two together, right? It's our mind and it's our body, because we have these overpowering thoughts that create emotions, and those emotions are stored in the body. So you can't heal from the neck up. You really need to get into the physical body, into the emotional body, into the energetics. And that's a lot of yoga, as well as you look at like the chakra system. But there needs to be psychological understanding of what is happening. You need to be familiar with your patterns, with these thought processes, with those thoughts that are triggering the emotions that essentially we suppress, and they get stuck in our physical body. So it started with yoga, and I hadn't really kind of understood the dynamic between the two. And then I kind of shifted into life coaching a little bit more. And now I'm really trying to bring it all together, where you focus sort of on somatic movement to, get into the body, and find a little bit more space. My favorite quote is Viktor Frankl's, between stimulus and response is space. And in that space, we have choice, and that's where our power lies. So the more space we're able to create, then the more we're able to dilute the chatter in our mind, the more we're able to feel into our body, right? We need space physically as well. And I feel like that's where true transformation happens. It's that ability to create space.
Yeah. I love that, because, I've been through years of therapy too. And I think therapy is wonderful. I think everyone should have a therapist, but there does come a point when you have to go beyond the conversation. And I think, we can get even hooked in something like therapy, which is something you do. You go once a week, you vent your issues, you kind of get it all out. But if you're not really proactive and taking the steps to change or put into action to help heal these things, it almost falls flat. It's like, to me, it's almost like that baby step into self-help and development. It's the first thing we think of. Let's go to a therapist and talk things through. Great. But what do we do with that? And what do we do next? And sometimes that's easier said than done. I mean, I had a therapist for years that we tried a lot of different things, yet I had to get medicated because I just couldn't overcome my ruminating thoughts and my OCD thoughts. And it took us a long time to get there, because it was kind of like, she's like, at one point she sat me down and she's like, we've tried everything and I know you're putting in the work, but we need to help you. And it was, a big moment for me to do that. Now I think there's a way off of it, and I want to be off of them. So I don't think medicating ourselves for the rest of our life is the way to go. But in that case, it made sense. Yeah, we have to take that therapy a step further, which something like yoga or any sort of somatic work. I've gone through breathwork, certification.
Totally.
Huge. Breathing is just so phenomenal. I know you work with breathwork a lot too. You have breathwork partners, and I mean, the power of our breath is incomparable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, look, there's so many things. Having children now, I kind of watch my kids. There's these things that the body used to do naturally, right? I mean, I always think of things like the physiological sigh, or kids stomping their feet, or jumping up and down, or any forms of emotional release that over time they've been conditioned out of us. And I think breathing, our ability to really tune into our breath and use that breath, we've lost it over time, and it absolutely can shift things. I think it's a big part of sort of energy and emotional release, and just grounding.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've conditioned ourselves out of even the fact of breathing. I've talked about this. I've told stories about this on the show myself. It's like, I will forget to breathe. I will be at a stop sign or a stop light, and I'll realize I am holding my breath. What am I doing? And I know it's like nervous system regulation. I know it's so funny We can know all the stuff. We can know all the science behind all these things. But why is it so hard to implement these like healthy lifestyle, healthy changes into our everyday?
I think, unfortunately, our brains are sort of programmed in a way where, our brain is always looking for safety. It's not looking for happiness. It's not really looking for, so it's constantly scanning for threats. And we live such chaotic lives that we are now under a constant state of threat or stress, right? So the system gets totally dysregulated. And I mean, this is the crazy thing. Like, our mind can play tricks on us. The body never will. But we're so quick to go to the mind, right? So we forget. We kind of disconnect from our physical body. I work with a lot of women in particular who feel very disconnected from their emotional state, like an inability to articulate how they're feeling. And I think it ties down to those sort of things. We don't listen to ourselves anymore. And we have such a powerful seat of intuition, and we've really been disconnected from that. But I agree. I think we not only hold our breath, most people breathe incorrectly. We're all chest breathers rather than belly breathers. Again, something that kids do naturally. It just gets sort of conditioned out of us.
Yeah, I have young kids too. And I always come back to that. We talk about children a lot on the show because it is one of those things. Like, we can learn so much. Our children hold so much wisdom that we have forgotten because they come in so highly connected. And it's just really those natural instincts. And it's us that condition it out of it. Just like you said, your relationship with your mom, it impacted everything going forward. Yet what's interesting is that you said, like, you did yoga to heal your relationship with your mom, but you also did yoga. And it sounds like because your mom was telling you to do yoga and that was her path. So like, that's a weird, like, that's kind of like a contradictory thing. It heals you and brought you together, yet you're still doing it for her. At least it started out that way.
Yeah. You know what? It was one of the big reasons I never wanted to teach was because she was a teacher, and I thought we were so different that, well, if she's a teacher, then I can never be a teacher. And I have to say that in going through this process, it just taught me a lot about myself. I mean, yes, I initially did it for her, but I stayed for me. I became a different teacher, right? And I think that's the beauty of yoga, is that there are different styles for everyone, and not everything suits everyone. So for someone who's like a people-pleasing perfectionist, it was a practice in surrender and also in authenticity, right? For me, yoga is a big part of my creative expression. And in order to express yourself creatively, you have to be authentic, because you can't be creative and people please. So it was just very powerful for me to kind of overcome that narrative, right? Because everything that we find ourselves stuck in is some form of story that we're buying into. And for me, it was that story of, I'm just so different to my mom that I can never do this. And it wasn't true.
So how do you actually step into that authenticity? That's a big one.
I think it's the same way that you find confidence. It's by feeling the fear and doing it anyway. It's by, I think so many of us are overcome by a fear of judgment. I think that's the number one thing that kind of holds most of us back. And so in order to be authentic, you have to be vulnerable, because you're exposing yourself to being judged in many ways. But it's also learning to have the conviction to be your true self, and to know that other people's judgments of you are none of your business, because you set the tone for how others treat you. If you have respect, if you have self-love, you'll attract the right people for you. It doesn't mean that everyone will like you. That falls into the people pleasing. But it means that you won't have these repetitive patterns. I had this one pattern with female friendships where I kept attracting women that I felt quite attached to, because I always had a very fragile relationship with my mom and the women in my life. And the friendships kept ending, like, throughout my life. And the immediate reaction is, well, I'm the common denominator, so clearly the problem is me. And yes, the problem is you, but not in the way that you think it is. It's that you are having some form of repetitive pattern whereby sort of your energetic magnetism is drawing in these same people and these same experiences in order for you to learn something about yourself. These aren't your people, right? Until you can learn to be authentic, you're not going to be attracting the right people for you. So yes, you're going to be constantly losing people. Does that make you the problem? In a way, but not that you are the problem. It's that you have these habits and patterns that you haven't worked through. You haven't understood the lesson. And until you can understand the lesson, you won't break free from attracting the same kind of people. It happens with partners, right? Women will always be like, why do I keep dating the same guy? Right? I'm always good. I always went for the bad boy, right? I was always looking for some kind of chase, some kind of validation, that I was worthy. I always wanted something that was hard to get. And then I'd wonder, like, why can't I find the right guy? And it's because I was just repeating this pattern over and over again until I realized one day that it wasn't what I wanted at all. And I had to be very honest with myself about, why am I going for that? And what is it that I really want? Like, deep down.
How do you get in touch with that? Because I resonate with what you're saying so much, especially in the female friendship side of it. It's like, and then taking that blame and putting it on myself as, that people pleaser, as that type A, as that go-getter. It's like, I am born and bred to say, I made the mistake, or it's my problem, or I did that. I want to take on all the blame because then I can fix it. It's almost like it gives me a sense of control over it. Okay, hi, I'm the problem. It's me, Taylor Swift here. But, it's like, I experience that too. So many friendships, especially female friendships, have come into my life and have disintegrated. And I definitely, the one time I know for sure it was because of my inauthenticity was in college. I felt so uncomfortable. And so I joined the sorority and I tried to be someone I wasn't. And, it was obvious I wasn't being authentic. So why would anyone want to be friends with me? Like, I totally get it. Like, I totally, completely understand why those friendships never lasted, because I was never me. I never felt comfortable enough to be me. So I think also we start to become more independent when things like that happen, especially at a point in college where you don't necessarily need other people. You can go out on your own. Oh, I can learn to go to dinner by myself. Oh, I can learn to go to a movie by myself. I got really good at doing things like that, which other people might seem scary. It's just like, no, I can do that. I don't need anyone else type of thing.
It becomes a little bit of like hyper independence.
Yeah, but that was just
right?
an effect
like keeping
of me
people at
being
an arm's
inauthentic.
distance.
Exactly. So how do we get back in touch with who we are with our authenticity so that we can attract the right people?
I'd start by saying, I'd start by saying, pay attention to blame, whether you're blaming someone else or blaming yourself. Yes, it's a form of control, but all blame does is control the narrative. So blame is just something that kind of puts you into victim mentality and no longer makes you accountable or in control of your life, ironically, because you think you're in control, but you're not really doing anything about it. So I think the blame angle also, it's one of the strongest forms of emotional abuse, and we do it to ourselves, self-blame. So it's be really mindful of those sort of things. I love shifting from victim mentality to accountability. Like, what can I do about this situation? Like, okay, what is it about all these people that are coming into and out of my life that's not working? And if I can have compassion and love for myself, then I'll stop blaming myself and maybe start to see, as a people pleaser, for me, a big thing was I always found people that needed me, right? Like, I always attracted people who either needed help or needed me in some form. And that kind of left me feeling worthy, but it also drained me because it wasn't really reciprocal. And there wasn't the depth that I was looking for, the connection that I was looking for. And so, connecting with your authenticity, all of it, it's connecting with yourself. It's doing everything that you can to understand, why do I feel depleted? Is this relationship lifting me up? Am I surrounding myself with people that support me or kind of put me down or drain my energy? How do I feel when I'm around them? Like, do I feel like I need to change who I am? Am I not, like, I don't feel cool enough, or I don't feel XYZ enough. And then you have to ask yourself, like, why do you want to be with people that make you feel that way? Right? It would be so much easier if you could just be and know that people accept you and love you the way that you are. And that's the hardest part, because until you love and accept yourself the way that you are, you can't expect others to. It's the same with respect. Until you respect yourself, people will be stepping over your boundaries all the time because you don't respect yourself. And all of this ties into authenticity. So it's not easy. It's like having the really tough conversation of, for me, one of the reasons I always thought I was to blame in female relationships is that I have, or at least I was always told growing up, because I was always told I was so sensitive, I became quite harsh. And so I think there's a part of my temperament that can be quite difficult. I also have ADD, so I can be quite, messages, quite fast or forgetful, one or the other. And so much gets misunderstood in those things. So all of a sudden you start analyzing yourself and saying like, oh, these are awful parts of who I am. Like I'm damaged in some way,
Yeah.
rather than being like, you know what? This is the way that I am. And somebody that knows me, like really knows me, is going to be like, man, she forgot to read my message. Or this is Mariel, like, let me clarify what she's saying because she's being a little aggressive in this message. Or, it's okay to be sensitive. Like, what a beautiful feminine quality, as opposed to everything that we get taught that teaches us to not like ourselves. Look, I think it's age too. I think age has really taught me a lot about not giving as much of a crap, pardon my French, about what other people think.
Really? Okay. So that's, I'm curious because I'm 42 now and I still deal with this. Like I will have this conversation with my husband. It has been so long that this has been my norm that I will be like, I just don't think anyone likes me. And I will, it's that thing. And he will say to me, he's just like, I don't understand why you think that no one likes you. Everyone I know like wants to be your friend and things like that. But I've told myself this narrative for so long because I've gone through life with so many difficult friendships. It started as a child. I was in a friendship, like a threesome of girls that was just toxic. It was not good. And it was back and forth. And then that just replicated itself in like junior high. It replicated itself in high school. Then I went to college thinking, okay, I can finally be me. And I didn't know who I was. Move into after, graduate college, go into the workplace where I actually felt quite confident in my skills. So I put a lot of emphasis on what I did because that gave me some sort of an identity that I felt good about. Yet bad relationship after bad relationship. I didn't get married till later. And I even said that to a new friend of mine because I moved across country a couple of years ago, not knowing anyone where I left. And I've made a wonderful friend that's a true friend here. And I said to her, I was like, wow, why do you like me? Like I didn't, she was laughing. She's like, that's what makes you likable. You don't think anyone likes you, like it's so interesting how we do that to ourselves. And we tell ourselves these stories that like, is it just because we don't really see our own worth?
Yeah. I mean, anytime you have a question like that, if I don't think anybody likes me, the first thing you should ask yourself is, in what ways do I not like myself? Right? Nobody finds me interesting. In what ways do you not find yourself interesting? Nobody loves me. In what ways do you not love yourself? Nobody is listening to me. How are you not listening to yourself? Everything that we feel triggered by externally is really a reflection of what's going on for us internally. So this feeling of like nobody likes me, there's probably like a small part of you that still hasn't come to terms with liking yourself, right? You want to feel like you are the common denominator. Like I must be the problem. There's like, and I think that's it. It's the, Brené Brown always talks about the difference between shame and guilt. And guilt is like, I've done something wrong. Shame is like, I am wrong. Like my being is wrong. I think many of us, I think shame is such a pervasive emotion that it is really quite dangerous if we're not careful, because it makes us feel alien. I went through it most of my life. Like I felt like such an outsider, and I felt like there was something fun, like just really wrong with who I was and the way I was. And so obviously the problem was me, because I am the problem. And so it's really, that's the depths of healing, is letting go of all these things that aren't serving you anymore to realize that you've always been worthy and that the only one that's not buying into it is you. Because the moment you do, everything around you changes. And maybe not in the way you want it, but in the way that you need it, right? You might never fit in with that threesome, right? That were toxic. You know they were toxic. You know they weren't right, but you'll still blame yourself for it ending, right? I wasn't cool enough. I wasn't this, that, and the other enough. But the moment you're like, actually, they just weren't my people. And it's okay. It's not that they were wrong. It's not that I was wrong. There is no right or wrong. I think that's a beautiful thing when people do values work. Sometimes when you find conflict between people, if you can just look at it as we have opposing value systems, that's it, right? They value X, I value this, and we just don't mesh. But we keep trying to force it and like sacrifice our values because we feel like we want to be a part of the tribe. It's just not your tribe.
So where does this stem from? Like, what have you seen where these issues of like, I don't like myself or that self-worth, where does that begin? Because we have to go there to heal it, right?
You know what? I've spent a lot of time looking at this. Gabor Mate, for one, is great when you look at sort of developmental psychology and trauma. And I'm going to give you an answer that sucks, but I'm going to explain it afterwards. It could be something as simple as your mom walked out of the room when you were 2 years old and you thought she was leaving you and you cried for 10 minutes and then she came back, but you had this wound of abandonment and it just made you needy and it made you attached, and you became like an anxious, avoidant attachment, whatever it might be. It could be something that's not easy for you to pinpoint. But I'm a firm believer, and this is maybe venturing into the woo-woo for those that don't believe in, but I really do believe that we choose our path. We choose our parents. We're here for the journey that we're meant to be on. So whatever small T trauma, big T trauma, whatever it is that we kind of encounter in our early lives, like that lays the foundation for the journey we need to be on to kind of have like the hero's journey, right? The big homecoming, but the homecoming's to yourself. It's how do you become your own savior? I think many of us grow up waiting for Prince Charming or waiting for their mother, and we've got all these mother wounds, father wounds, all these different things, that it's not about having bad parents. I think most parents are doing the best that they can with what they know. And knowledge is changing all the time, right? Babies should sleep on their belly. No, they should sleep on their back. No, like co-sleep, don't co-sleep. I mean, everything's just... So I think ultimately it's about recognizing, look, we all, and actually I was speaking to a client about this the other day. So many of us feel like misfits. And the one thing that makes us fit is that we all feel like misfits. Like, how ironic that the one thing that makes us all belong is that we all feel like we don't belong. I mean, it's ironic and funny if it weren't so sad, because I, for one, struggled with belonging my whole life and I felt very lonely. And it's taken me a long time. I do a group coaching course and we always start with core wounds, and it can take a while to really pinpoint what your core wound is. But once you understand what that core wound is, so many of your interactions in life become a lot clearer, like especially your triggers. So for me, I grew up with, I have a wonderful family and my brother is like incredible, but he was the golden child, younger brother. And I think because he's such a great guy, it was just so frustrating because he was always the chosen one. It's the narrative I bought into. It's the story I created in my life. So my core wound became, nobody chooses me. And when that's your core wound, it plays out in social media. Oh, nobody likes my posts. It plays out in relationships. I need to be chosen. Somebody has to choose me. In friendships, right? I need to be a part of that trio, right? They have to choose me. Otherwise, I'm never chosen. And it just becomes this repetitive cycle that plays out in every aspect of your life until you can see it for what it is. And so you can start to challenge it. Like, how true is that? And can I be 100% true, like sure that that's true, or can I contradict it? And if that was the case when I was a child, like why does that have to be true throughout my life? Like it isn't true. And the core wound, I wasn't choosing myself. That's where the inauthenticity was, right? And it's such a desperate attempt to be chosen. I became a chameleon. I became great at being likable. I became great at being a people pleaser, but I completely lost sight of who I was. And so you learn to kind of work through, and that's been my journey. And there's layers, right? Like I'm still going through other things. It kind of takes you to new depths. But I found that to be really profound, understanding that core wound.
Yes. I mean, my mind is going a million miles a minute as you're talking about these things, because I mean, you're speaking my language here. This is so true. And I mean, even what you're saying is like, we keep going. The depths of this like never ends. And do you think, because I mean, we talk woo-woo all the time on the show, so that's fine. Do you think, I agree with you. I think we choose our parents. I think we come earthside for a certain experience. And do you think our main lesson or our main thing that we're all working towards is coming back to ourselves?
Yeah, because when we come back to ourselves, we come back to each other, right? I did a really profound experience yesterday, so I'm kind of gonna go off on I did a vision quest, plant medicine. It was incredible. Mm-hmm. But I remember while I was in it, and we're hiking, so it's you're in nature. And I was sitting there listening to these birds, and they just sounded so beautiful. And I remember thinking like, wow, I wonder if they know how beautiful they are. And then I had like this instant pang of like, man, I wonder if someone's watching me, like wondering if I know how beautiful I am. And it was just so profound and so deep. And it was this feeling of like, once I think if I could connect with that, I connect with the oneness of all things, right? If I can find myself, then I know what it is to find someone else, what it is to be connected to everything around me. But it has to start with me. I think we're all programmed to look for the answers outside of ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. We're looking for the friend, we're looking for the partner, we're looking for that holiday, the big house, all these other things, as if that's going to make our life better. And it does. To a certain extent, but like I think real joy, like genuine joy, stems from being deeply rooted in who you are and being able to love yourself, because again, that's a reflection that happened. You love yourself, you love other people. We can only meet people as deeply as we've met ourselves. Mm-hmm. So if you can really love yourself, then you can really love someone else. If you can really hold compassion for yourself, you can really hold it for someone else. And yeah, so I think the moment we come home to ourselves is the moment we come home to each other.
I wonder how we reconcile that, though, because I understand what you're saying. I agree that we need to come back to ourselves. Yet then there's still that human side of me that's like striving for all that materialistic stuff. And that's all this outward facing thing. And I know it's rooted in me, because in the way I've always approached love from my family's standpoint, and I'm not saying that my parents or anyone said this to me, it's just the way I've, formulated in my head is, when I get this, when I achieve this, then I'm accepted and I'm loved. So there's still that side of me. And I know there's this driving force of me that's wanting to achieve all these things so I can return to that pride that I know that they felt about me when I was getting those straight A's, or when I was doing this, or, whatever that was, when I had that Hollywood career that was so glamorous and things like that, that really weren't. Yet yeah. I know better. And I know that the only true joy and happiness and contentment, which I think is the emotion that we really should be striving for, is contentment, because that's kind of in that middle. It allows you to go up and down. Like, that's what we need to experience in life. But to come back to finding that contentment means none of that matters. And it means coming back to yourself. So how do you reconcile that humanness and that that knowledge that we need to come back to being one?
It's interesting. I often find that I don't think there's anything wrong desiring nice things, right? Like I'm all for like working hard, making money. Money's just another form of energy. We all have a very strange relationship with it. I think there's a lot of trauma around money, and I think we need to heal that. Now, there's a difference between already being home to yourself and then living your passion, and then the money is kind of like the byproduct of doing what you love, and it just adds to this sort of energy of abundance. There's a difference between that to, if I get this, then when this happens, then, because it's all contingent on something outside of you. Like happiness won't be achievable until when I think it lives in us, right? Our ability to feel joy, to feel happiness, to feel gratitude. And I think from that place of inner abundance, the external abundance becomes much easier. It doesn't become effort or to prove something. I have a spiritual teacher who I adore, and he always says, when we're trying to prove something, we live in the energy of doubt. And so proving just means that you don't feel confident in yourself. You're trying to prove yourself, to someone else, to your parents, to whoever. But that's all from the energy of doubt, really low vibrational energy. And it's not like a shaming thing, because we all do it. We're all trying to prove ourselves to some degree. But by acknowledging it, then you can meet it with a higher vibration, such as compassion or kindness or understanding or love. And the more that roots you in yourself, then you kind of stop proving per se, and you really just start pushing what you love, right? Like I have a pretty strong social media presence. Most people in the spiritual world would be like, Instagram's the devil. I like having a tool where I can express myself. I like that form of creative expression, but I feel like everything I get from it, whether it's followers or clients, that's the byproduct of sharing what I love authentically. Right? You won't see me doing like sort of ads per se. I mean, at some point, maybe if I need the money, I would, but like it would have to feel authentic. And so everything that I share, it's very hard for me to be very salesy, even for my own stuff, probably to my detriment. But I find that ever since I've taken that mentality of like, I don't care if people like this or not, I'm like, this is me and this is going out there. My Instagram's blown up, and that wasn't the goal, right? That became the byproduct of just doing what I love and sort of expressing myself authentically. And there's this beautiful reading called Do You Spend Your Time Measuring or Mattering? And in it, they talk about happiness. They're like, happiness isn't a goal. It's the byproduct of doing what you love. And I think we always miss the target because the goal is the wrong one. I want to make money. Like, let that be the byproduct. I don't know that that's necessarily your goal. I think the goal would be like, I want to live a life that's like full, because I can tell you there's people with tons of money that are very unhappy, right? Most, I think, people that have too much money for their own good and they're deeply dissatisfied internally. I think money's the byproduct, the side.
So fascinating that you're saying it, because I'm having this thought come in that it's like, we are monetizing. We have gotten to a point where we are monetizing our spiritual awakening, where we are monetizing our healing journey, where we are monetizing our search for self, where we are monetizing what we think is authentic, which strips away all that authenticity, that true creativity, and that showing up in our energy as who we are, in that loving, compassionate, accepting person. So the minute we are monetizing anything that we're doing, and it's not that money's bad, but when we're putting that fact of like, what am I going to get out of this? Or how many followers, or how many, like if we're putting a results qualifier on anything that we're hoping to achieve, we are negating it essentially. We are negating the authenticity of it.
Your why, right? Because it's so many times you'll hear people, I mean, myself included, and I have to have this talk with myself often, but I host a workshop, and then all of a sudden like 3 people show up, and I'm like, oh my God, like what, something must be, and I have to come back to my why. I'm like, if I could change those 3 people's lives with what I share, mission accomplished. I've done a good job, you know? Like we keep forgetting like, oh, because that's, again, it's the conditioning, it's the social media, it's the popularity contest. We get very sidetracked. So every time kind of that happens, it's like, why are you doing what you're doing? And really make sure it's for the right reasons. Because you're absolutely right. I think we can get, we can lose track of the authentic purpose and shift into the wrong goal.
Because if you come back to it, almost everyone out there that's in our space, in the spiritual world and the personal growth and the development or the self-help space, I think are pretty well intentioned. And if you go back to where they started, it's going to say, you know, if I can just touch one person, or if I can just help one person, it will have been worth it. Like you're saying, these 3 people, like maybe those 3 people just needed your undivided attention. Yet we get so distracted. And I think that's just learning to balance this ego humanness with the spiritual oneness of coming back to who we truly are. And that's an art form. I mean, God, if we have a magic pill for that, I'm sure we can monetize that. Good Lord. But like,
it's, you know, what one thing I really find, because it's been coming up for me a lot, is I think it humbles us intentionally. Because if it were easy, everyone would do it. And I think if it humbles us and we hold the perseverance, like we're like, no, this is my conviction. Like I deeply believe in my purpose and this is what I want to be doing. It's like, you kind of like get past that hump of like, man, nothing's working out. Nobody's showing up. You show up, right? Like you keep showing up. I think that makes the difference.
Oh my goodness. I love that. Well, how do we show up and learn with you?
So I offer one-to-one coaching sessions. I also have a group coaching. It's called Unearth to Rebirth. It's a 3-month group coaching course. We meet 6 times, and then there's an online portion of it. And I'm just going through my current cohort, and it's amazing. I love working in groups because I really do feel like so much healing happens in connection, in that solidarity and that support that you get from especially women. I'm really drawn to working with women at the moment. I miss just having like women's circles and that energy of not competitiveness or judgment, but actual like support and solidarity. I think women are unstoppable when we support each other. So those are the main things that are coming out. I've got free webinars on my website for those that want to follow those, and a couple of courses that I'm going to be launching in the next couple months. But yeah.
I love it. And I love that, you know, you said you had all these challenging relationships with women growing up, yet now you are so drawn to working with women and that connection with women, which is so interesting because, you know, like I said, I had those same things, especially with women in my relationships. Yet now here I am. And when I started this podcast, it wasn't just like this women-centered thing, yet it has grown into this female empowerment place. And it's just fascinating how like, it's almost like we had to experience that in our youth. To get understand the importance of it now. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. I feel such a, and I think motherhood plays a big role, not the only role, but for me, motherhood woke up a lot of my feminine energy in ways that I would have never expected, especially having a daughter, kind of confronted a lot of my own sort of inner child work. But I also find it super ironic, but it makes total sense that my whole life I was so heavily in the masculine, and now I just feel like this deep desire to connect with women. And I love it. I feel like it's been a long time coming.
I love it. Yeah. I have a daughter and a son, and it's really, really interesting to see the different dynamics. I'm definitely, it's so fascinating because I grew up with, you know, my mom, my sister, you know, I had a sister, I had like lots of girls in my life. We didn't have boys. Like I had mainly girl cousins. We had like one boy cousin. So I didn't know. So I really knew what like the female dynamic kind of in a relationship was going to be like, but having a son adds a total, like I show up so differently with my daughter versus my son. And I don't know why. It just happens. And I'm trying to change that because I almost feel like I'm a lot harder on my daughter and I'm a lot more just lenient with my son. It's interesting and I don't like it.
I think there's, there's a lot that gets handed down. I also think I have a daughter and a son as well. And I'm a little bit the opposite. I've been like so focused on my daughter because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like, we're healing generational trauma here that I feel like I've almost neglected my son a little bit. And boy energy is just different. But there's something about boys, like they're just such mamas. Like they're so like, especially when they're tiny, they're much more affectionate and attached. And so I can understand, I feel like I'm understanding what happened with my mom and my brother a lot more. Because I think I grew up a little bit where I was treated much harsher and my brother was just like the loving, he could get away with murder and he'd be fine. But it's so hard. I mean, I really do. So much healing work can happen just by watching your interactions with your children, and essential to be compassionate, because let me tell you, there's no getting it right in this parenthood thing. Again, we're doing the best we can, there's a beautiful quote that says like one of the hardest and least spoken about things in motherhood is having to reparent your children while reparenting your inner child. And it's so true. We're on a healing journey, and so if we're not careful, we're just handing down this generational baggage. I think it's weird. There is definitely different energy between the girl and the boy, but I agree. I think there's so much conditioning as well that we have to be mindful of like, I need to keep more of an eye on her and he can be a little bit freer. It's a very masculine, like, all these little things that I think we've just been conditioned into believing. Whereas, and I think boys also, I'm so conscious of my emotional language with my daughter. And I'm like, I need that with my son. I want my son to grow up emotionally intelligent, right? Not feeling like big boys don't cry kind of thing. So there's work to be done.
Yes. No, and like you said, we're all doing the best we can, and we do need to have compassion and grace for our parenthood journey as well. And remember, like we talked about, we chose this journey. We chose this path. These children chose us for a reason. So even when we don't think we're showing up in the best way, it's not that we're necessarily handing down all these generational curses to them. It's they also chose to have this experience with us too. And so maybe that can allow us a little bit of compassion and grace in it, because it's definitely a juggling act, and it's interesting to heal yourself while parenting your children. It's a trick.
It is 100%.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much. I so enjoyed talking to you today, and I look forward to seeing all of your trips and everything you have coming up.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Mariel Witmond, for the great conversation about going within to find out who we are truly and authentically. If you want to work with Mariel, I'll put all the information in the show notes below. And as always, you can find Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers and Intentional Media on our website at CourtneyMyers.com. That's where you'll find our books, our courses, and everything else we have coming up. I'll talk to you soon.